Okay. Well, Isaac, you really never feel like being at school. You never feel like doing math. You never want to pay attention, like all of the days. So, okay. Thank you, Teacher Cardarius. Luckily, I'm old and I've done this forever and I know exactly what we're going to do, but I appreciate your input. All right, so first of all, to start, all of the functions are all written in this form. All of them, every time. Sometimes we don't have all the variables, but they're all written in this form. And the A and the D, which variable do they affect? A and D affect Y. And the B and the C affect X. And they're liars. That's why there are X's, because they lie. So we break up with them because there are X's. So B and C affects the X variable. So in example number 1, this is my X, this is my Y. I'm going to start with the Y because you all seem to understand that one better. So we'll do Y first. So if I start with 1, what do I do with that? Correct. Mrs. Archer? Hey, Galen. Yes. Sure. Ashley. On the phone. Okay, so we're going to, this one is going to affect the Y. So my Y is 1, so I'm going to multiply the Y times negative 3, and I get negative 3. So we're finding, I want to know what the new point is. If I start there, and this is the transformations, I want to know what the new point is. So pi over 2, that's my X now. So what's the phase shift here? So I have to take pi over 2 minus pi over 6. And this is where I'm not going to be nice, right? Because you got to get common denominators and subtract. And if you can't do that, find a 5th grade video on Khan Academy and figure out how to get common denominators. So this is 3 pi over 6. So I get 3 pi over 6 minus pi over 6, which is going to give me 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3. So my new point is pi over 3, negative 3. So on number 2, I'm starting with a point 0, 1. So you apply what you think the new point is going to be. X and Y. Make those transformations and write it down. That's what I said. Yeah, I saw you. So, look, so this goes with your Y. So 1 minus 2 is, oh, wait, you might have that right. You got to multiply first. Negative 1, minus 3. Because you have to multiply first and then subtract. All right. Okay, what don't you get? Like, I don't get it's not a question, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not. Okay, so I'm I'm being a little ugly, but does it even matter what what function I'm doing? It doesn't. None at all. This is the point, and you got to do these transformations. That's the only thing you're doing. So when it says the transformations, which do I do first? All right, if we're starting with the y, you got to reflect first because that's multiply, right? So 1 times the negative 1 is negative 1 minus 2. Like, what don't you get? So if I have 0, I have a 0 for my x. This time, it's 3x. So it's with my x variable, so I know it's a liar. So it's multiplying now. I don't want to multiply. I'm going to divide. So 0 divided by 3 is 0. Minus 2 goes with the y variable. All right. So if I start with pi and negative 1, pi and negative 1. So if I do pi, I'm doing the x variable first. So in the x variable, 0.5 is a half, right? So that's dividing by 2. What's the opposite or the inverse of dividing by 2? Multiply by 2. So I'm going to multiply pi times 2, and I get 2 pi. Next, I'm going to take the negative 1. I have to multiply first. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2 plus 1.
Okay, that one's starting to get easy. Okay, I'll give you the fourth one. So
all right.
So the first variable, you just do it.
What?
You do the first variable with whichever one x is on.
Okay. So, all right. So on the homework that we spent 3 days doing, when the 3 is on the inside, what do we have to do? All right. So if I do that, and by the way, again, a little bit of the reason that I'm crabby. So some of you that copied the homework, there were several of you that inverted the columns. I just wrote a 0. So if you have a 0 and you know you turned it in after copying it, I'm not playing. Like if it takes me longer to correct it than it took you to write it down, I'm giving you a 0 just because there was in this class. They're all in the book already, so. All right.
Wait, where did you get the 3 from under the pi?
Okay, what's right? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Isaac. If you did the homework, you know you can't have the 3 under there. It is right there. Well, you can't. You had to divide pi by 3 to take out the 3. So, right. So if you didn't do the homework, that's probably one of those little things that you didn't get because you were just writing them down. So, all right, so next, if I do the 3 pi over 2, and I put it in for x, so what affects the x here? Minus pi over 3 and the 3. So what's the first thing I have to do? I have to do the 3. So I'm going to take 3 pi over 2 divided by 3, which is the same as multiplying by a third. So you get 3 pi over 6. And now I want to subtract the pi over 3, or add it. So this is 2 pi over 6. 2 pi over 6. So I get 5 pi over 6. Then to find the y, If I take the negative 1 times 0.5, I get negative 0.5. If I subtract another 0.5, I get negative 1. Pi and negative 1. What? 2. It is. Y is 2. Bruno, what's the x? Uh-huh. Don't listen to him. So the pi is there. It can't just be pi. You haven't done anything to it. What's the b? It is 2 pi. Because the b is 1/2, so you have to flip it and multiply. Okay. So, go to the white paper. Yeah, well, just in that little blank paper part above, I just want to show you what I'm about to do. Okay. First of all, on the unit circle, just the unit circle, I want to know what are the quadrantals. So the first one is 0.
The first quadrantal is 1.
No, it's not. It's 0. The next quadrantal is pi over 2. The next one is pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So the first thing you're going to do every time, are you listening? The first thing you're going to do every time is in the top part right here, you're going to write down the quadrantals in the x. 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. The next thing you're going to do is look at what function you're doing. I'm doing sine. Is sine x or y? Y. So at 0, what's my y value? The y value at 0. Okay, use your little hand if you have to. At 0, I want to know what's the y value. How many fingers are below? 0. So the value is 0. Right here, what's your y value? The y value. I said, what's the y value at 0? Okay. I don't want the 1, that's the cosine. I want the y value because we're doing sine. And this is how we end up not understanding. So, the first one's 0. What's the y value at pi over 2? 1. At pi, what's the y value? 0. At 3 pi over 2, negative 1. And at 2 pi, it's back to 0. So for those of you who think memorizing is hard, sine always starts at 0, and these alternate. 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. If you can't memorize, you should learn the pattern, because this isn't going to be up when you take your test. So next, I moved it to Tuesday. So right here, y equals minus sine of 4x. So what am I going to do with the 4? That's with the x. Am I going to multiply or divide? Divide. So I'm going through. 0 divided by 4 is 0. Pi over 2 divided by 4 is pi over 8. Pi divided by 4 is pi over 4. 3 pi over 2 divided by 4 is 3 pi over 8. 2, so we're dividing by 4. So 2 pi divided by 4 gives me pi over 2. It is. So then, what do I do with the negative? You multiply the y times the negative. So 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0. So these are your transformation points. So the next thing I'm going to look at before I put them on here is these are set up in pi over 2 and pi. So if it's set up with pi over 2 here, then it's saying this is 30, this is 60, this is 90, right? Is that going to work for pi over 8 and pi over 4? Because even if you don't know what pi over 8 is, pi over 4 is 45, and that's none of these, right? And so pi over 8 is halfway between pi over 4. It's not even an exact number. So when it's like that, it's easier just to renumber. And so if we don't use this, if I just make each one of these a pi over 8, 0, 0, this one's pi over 8, the next one is pi over 4, and then the one I crossed out is 3 pi over 8, and then pi over 2. Well, look at your paper and copy down from above. So it's 3 pi over 8, and I can't write it because I crossed it out. It's here. So at 0, I have a 0. What do I get at pi over 8? Negative 1. What do I get at pi over 4? 0. At 3 pi over 8? 1. At pi over 2? 0. So what's the period of that function? Pi over 2. That's how far we went. Pi over 2. So that's the period. So if I wanted to say add another period on here, do I have to go through this all over again? Can't you just follow the pattern? Down, up, up. And does that work going backwards as well? It does. So you only have to do it one time. Okay, turn your paper over. So before you start, write down all the quadrantals. It's the first thing you're going to do. 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So what is the x value at 0? 1. So this time we're going to start with 1. 0, negative 1, 0, 1. So what am I going to do with my x value now? Multiply it by 2. So I'm going to get 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. So what's the period of this function? What's the very last x? 4 pi. So the period is 4 pi. Okay, next I'm going to multiply my y's times 4. So I'm going to get 4, 0, negative 4, 0, and positive 4. So if I have pi and 2 pi, what else do I need? And? So how many? I went 1, 2, and then pi. So 1, 2, 3 pi, 1, 2, 4 pi. And then we can graph. So at 0, I have 4. At pi, it's 0. At 2 pi, it's negative 4. No. No. All right. Everybody graph the last one. Graph number 3. Nope. Why didn't I change? Because what's the first one I had to graph at? And then pi over 3, and then pi over 2. That's what they're set at. So I didn't change anything.
Oh, do the 3's cancel out on the 3/4 one?
Okay, how many of you got this?
I was so close, man.
Okay. Well, if you change your, like on the ones where I did pi over 8 and pi over 4, you have to label those, right? I have to know if you're changing. But if you leave them the same, then that's okay. But remember, these are 30, 60, bless you, 90, okay? They're at increments of 30 on this. Okay, so the other thing is, if you were going to do tangent, right? Tangent, and that seems to be what was giving you the hardest time on the homework. The tangent, use the exact same numbers and do the transformations on the numbers and get your new tangent functions. Okay? All right, so what I want you to do